Over a year ago, I put out a video on Turkmenbashi, the late dictator of Turkmenistan, and I can't even tell you the amount of people who have asked me to do another video on a dictator. It's almost as many as the amount of people who left a comment saying Turkmenbashi is the real-life Aladdin. Thank you for your contribution. Despite the requests, I didn't want to seem like a one-trick pony, so I went ahead and put out several other videos that nobody watched. But now that enough time has passed, I'm ready to tell you about another incredibly weird dictator. This time we're talking about the African country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that is not to be confused with the Republic of the Congo, which is the country directly next to it. Very simple. But despite one of the republics of the Congo having the word democratic in the name, throughout the 20th century there was nothing democratic about it. There was nothing democratic about the other one either, but that's beside the point. The Democratic Republic of the Congo was controlled by Belgium starting in 1885. During which time it was known as the Congo Free State, despite the fact that there was nothing free about it. The Belgian government used the Congo Free State to produce rubber and as a place for them to commit numerous atrocities. But the country finally achieved independence in June of 1960. Unfortunately, the first prime minister was quickly assassinated, followed by the country going through several different leaders before we land on the main character of this video, Mobutu Sese Seko. Mobutu was a lieutenant colonel in the military who took control of the country after leading a coup to overthrow the previous government. A government which had been put in place after he had led a previous coup against the government before that. Mobutu took complete control of the country and permanently suspended parliament, claiming he would return it to a democracy in 5 years. But you might not be surprised to hear that that didn't happen. Mobutu described his own politics as, quote, neither left, nor right, nor even center. I guess there's a secret fourth thing on the political spectrum. And that fourth thing turned out to be fascism. In 1971, Mobutu changed the name of the country to Zaire, meaning river, and declared himself the president. Now, I'm guessing he changed it because he had no interest in the country being democratic, and the name Republic of the Congo was somehow already taken. He also changed the recently adopted flag to this one of an arm holding a torch. And it seems the flag designer survived all the government overthrows because these are both really clean designs. One of the principles of Mobutu's reign was the program of national authenticity, which was the mission to make Zaire more African. Although the name Zaire itself is actually a Portuguese mispronunciation of the Congo language, so the program was off to a rough start. Mobutu required all citizens of Zaire to change their Western or Christian names to authentic Zairean names, and forbade all priests from baptizing anyone with a non-Zairean name. My apologies to any of you planning a Zairean baptism for your son Peter. As for Mobutu's full name, which he gave himself upon assuming office, it translates to the all-powerful warrior who, because of his endurance and inflexible will to win, shall go from conquest to conquest, leaving fire in his wake. Really rolls off the tongue. Mobutu also banned all Western suits and required men to wear what he called the abacost, a closed, lightweight suit jacket, although I think Chairman Mao beat him to that style by a couple decades. As part of the National Authenticity Program, people were forbidden from referring to each other as the standard Monsieur and Madame, instead told to address each other as citizen, making Mobutu a true non-binary legend. In 1974, Mobutu attempted to bring positive global publicity to Zaire by hosting the legendary boxing match Rumble in the Jungle between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali. And I suppose that is good publicity, as long as nobody asked any questions at all about how the country was run. The match also brought the nation a 3-day music festival called Zaire 74, which featured performances from artists including James Brown, B.B. King, Bill Withers, and The Spinners. I think they were going for a certain theme on those artists, in case you were wondering why Gordon Lightfoot wasn't invited. The two fighters spent months in Zaire in order to prepare for the match in the country's climate. Unfortunately, a training injury to George Foreman forced the match to be postponed by 5 weeks, during which time they just had to hang out in Zaire. Let's just hope George Foreman didn't try to get baptized while he was in town. To put on the fight, Mobutu had to cover the $10 million prize, and that was honestly one of the more reasonable financial decisions he ever made. You see, the entirety of Mobutu's reign was absolutely littered with corruption and embezzlement. It started off small and got worse and worse over the years. Mobutu himself was pretty open about it, once saying, "If you want to steal, steal a little in a nice way. But if you steal too much to become rich overnight, you will be caught." Very wise advice from the leader of a country. His strategy was essentially to skim a little off the top of the government's funds, slowly embezzling it to make himself rich. But even he failed to take his own advice, stealing more and more as he continued to get away with it. In 1970, it was estimated that he had stolen 60% of the nation's budget that year, and it only got worse. To make sure that nobody could ever amass enough power to overthrow him, Mobutu would constantly rotate members of the government. Over the course of his rule, he reshuffled his cabinet 60 times. Nothing more efficient than letting everyone try every job for a couple weeks at a time. Oh, you liked being the Secretary of Agriculture? Well, you're in charge of commerce now. This system encouraged every member of his government to steal as much as possible, because by the time anyone figured it out, they'd be working in a whole different department. But if any ministers got caught stealing, Mobutu was perfectly willing to have them tortured, only to frequently pardon them afterwards and reward them with new positions in the government. Just a dash of torture to keep you on your toes. But you might be wondering where the country was getting all their money if everyone was stealing all the time. The answer is the United States and other Western countries. Since Mobutu took a hard stance against communism, he received pretty consistent financial support from capitalist countries looking to stop the spread of communism in Africa. So all he had to do was denounce the Soviet Union and keep collecting his paycheck. The country was also rich in natural resources such as copper and cobalt, but they were sold off so Mobutu could steal that money too. Meanwhile, Mobutu continued to build a cult of personality in Zaire. He hung pictures of himself across the country and made his cabinet members wear pins featuring his portrait. He also gave himself the titles Father of the Nation, Savior of the People, Guide of the Revolution, and Messiah. Glad he didn't let the power get to his head. Always nice to see a dictator stay humble. I saw some claims that he forbade everyone from wearing his iconic leopard print hat, but I couldn't find a reliable source on that. And I think even Mobutu wasn't evil enough to gatekeep a look that clean. But we know for a fact that he did make every evening newscast open with a video of his face descending through the clouds, just in case the title Messiah was too subtle. It has been estimated that Mobutu stole over $3 billion from his country over the years, using it either for bribes or to fund his own luxury lifestyle. Mobutu owned a yacht and built a personal palace that he called the Versailles of the Jungle. He also bought numerous properties in other countries and would often go on vacation, including one time that he used a government plane to take a 100-member entourage to Disney World. And if they all got Fast Pass, you better hope they didn't come to the ride you were waiting for. While Mobutu was stealing more and more money, his country was gradually collapsing. By the late 80s, many government employees went months without being paid, and the rapid inflation caused most wages to be worthless anyway. The infrastructure got to be so bad that most places no longer had paved roads, driving around in dirt that would quickly turn to mud when it rained. The potholes were so big that they were said to swallow cars whole. Sounds like someone tortured a few too many secretaries of transportation. But Mobutu had no issue silencing anyone who opposed him, and if he couldn't do it himself, he would call upon his powerful allies. 2 invasions by foreign rebels in the late 70s were silenced with the help of French, Belgian, and American forces. But when the Cold War ended, there wasn't much money left in opposing communism, causing the country to lose their Western allies. Things got particularly bad in May of 1990, when students at the National University of Zaire protested Mobutu's regime. He responded by cutting electricity to the school and sending in a special military unit armed with machetes, who then proceeded to kill around 300 students. You might find that story shocking, but I was honestly more surprised to find out that they had a university at all. After that massacre, Europe and the US ended all support to Zaire, leaving Mobutu without a lot of allies. He was quoted saying, "I am the latest victim of the Cold War, no longer needed by the US. The lesson is that my support for American policy counts for nothing." I would say the lesson is that you can't murder 300 students with machetes, but what do I know? In 1991, feeling his impending loss of power, Mobutu allowed the creation of a coalition government to give the people the illusion of democracy while he kept all the power. But that still didn't change the fact that the economy was essentially non-existent and the roads were eating cars. The final straw for Mobutu came when he welcomed people involved in the Rwandan genocide to stay in Zaire. And yes, you guessed it, he welcomed the ones committing the genocide. In 1996, a rebel group led by a man named Laurent Kabila began an uprising against the government. The resulting conflict was known as the First Congo War, and was sometimes called Africa's First World War since it involved 14 African countries. But while the war was happening, Mobutu was already dying of cancer and spent most of his time in Europe for treatment. Slowed down by the non-existent infrastructure, the rebels finally took the capital in May of 1997, at which point Nelson Mandela established peace talks between Mobutu and Kabila. But the peace talks failed, and Mobutu was forced to go into exile. He died 4 months later in Morocco at the age of 66. Kabila then declared himself president and immediately changed the name of the country back to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Unfortunately, Kabila also announced that he would not hold elections for 2 years in order to restore order, and essentially ran back the exact same playbook as Mobutu. But it didn't last very long, because in 1998, Kabila turned against his allies in Rwanda and Uganda, beginning the Second Congo War. This war was much worse than the first one, lasting almost 5 years and claiming the lives of an estimated 5.4 million people, making it the deadliest conflict since World War II. All of a sudden, that Mobutu administration doesn't seem too bad, does it? The war ended up in a stalemate, but it did lead to a multi-party government for the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And the first president was none other than Kabila's son, Joseph Kabila. Doesn't seem like there's a ton of options in this country. But Joseph Kabila was re-elected as president twice and served from 2001 to 2019. Unfortunately, in 2021, it was reported that Kabila had stolen over $138 million while he was the president. So it seems like, apart from the name, things haven't changed too much for the Democratic Republic of the Congo. But hey, at least you're allowed to be named Steve now. Now please consider subscribing, or I'll make you Zaire's Secretary of Transportation.